For more than a decade, Katie Holmes stayed quiet, locking away the truth behind a marriage the world thought it understood. At 45, she's finally opening up, not with rage or revenge, but with the heavy calm of someone who lived through something she can finally name. Behind those flawless red carpet smiles, she says, there was a reality far darker than anyone ever guessed. As she looks back on the whirlwind that pulled her into Tom Cruise's universe, the picture turns uneasy fast. What once looked like a dream slowly revealed itself as a tightly controlled system. Katie believed she was stepping into the life she'd imagined since her teenage years, the kind of fairy tale Hollywood sells non-stop. Back in 2004, she even admitted in 17 magazine that she admired Tom and joked about marrying him, never thinking those words would come true so literally. At 26, Katie was climbing fast, mostly known for Dawson's Creek and seen as America's sweetheart. Tom, at 42, was already one of the most powerful actors on the planet, with a global reputation and deep ties to Scientology that shaped his inner circle. From the outside, it looked magical, but behind the scenes, she says the reality felt nothing like a romance she chose freely. According to former Scientology insiders, things were already moving before Katie even entered the picture. In September 2004, Tom reportedly told Scientology leader David Miscavige he was struggling to find a girlfriend. Ex-officials Mike Rinder and Marty Rathbun later claimed this triggered an internal effort to find someone suitable for him, someone loyal and unlikely to question his growing devotion to the church. Past relationships were reportedly dismissed for failing that test. Nicole Kidman had been labeled a suppressive person after leaving Scientology, and Penelope Cruz was said to be ruled out for refusing to abandon her Buddhist beliefs. The goal, insiders claimed, was total alignment, no resistance, no pushback. What followed, they allege, was a secretive audition process disguised as a training film. Scientologist actresses were questioned about loyalty, obedience, and even their feelings toward Tom. Former members Mark and Claire Headley said they witnessed stacks of tapes, suggesting his next relationship was being shaped long before it ever went public. Then came March 2005. Just after Katie quietly ended her engagement to Chris Klein, she and Tom were suddenly linked. Fans raised eyebrows, while insiders reportedly saw it as the plan clicking into place. Katie later learned that a Scientology chaperone, Jessica Rodriguez, had been placed in her daily life, attending interviews, speaking on her behalf, and calling herself her best friend after barely 6 weeks. The relationship moved at breakneck speed. In April 2005, they went public in Rome, and soon after, Tom famously declared his love on Oprah's couch. The moment became pop culture comedy, but behind the laughter, it marked how intensely devotion was being pushed into the spotlight. From the outside, it still looked like a dream, but for Katie Holmes, this was the moment everything shifted into something far more controlled than she ever expected. The fairy tale the public adored masked a reality built on rules, watchers, and quiet pressure. Just 2 months after going public, Tom proposed at the Eiffel Tower, a picture-perfect move that screamed romance to the world. But behind the scenes, the structure around Katie was already tightening. Within months, Scientology's presence in her life grew louder and more unavoidable. Despite previously denying any involvement with the church, Katie converted, a sudden change that stunned people close to her. During the War of the Worlds and Batman Begins press tours in 2005, those around her noticed how rarely she appeared alone, how conversations seemed guided rather than organic. Jessica Rodriguez, a longtime Scientology member, was constantly at Katie's side, stepping into interviews, redirecting questions, and presenting herself as Katie's closest friend. Katie publicly insisted she felt no pressure, but years later, Viewers revisiting those interviews wondered who that reassurance was really meant for. By October 2005, Katie was pregnant with Suri, and even that joyful moment came wrapped in controversy. Tom openly admitted to buying a home sonogram machine, a move that prompted FDA warnings and raised eyebrows everywhere. It was another signal that in his world, normal boundaries didn't always apply. Their 2006 wedding in Italy was lavish, glamorous, and unforgettable, but it was also deeply intertwined with Scientology rituals. David Miscavige stood as Tom's best man, a powerful reminder that Katie wasn't just marrying a movie star, she was stepping into the church's inner circle. Former Scientologists later described unsettling moments from the ceremony, including adults speaking to baby Suri as if she were a fully aware adult. Katie never addressed these stories directly, but the accounts aligned closely with Scientology teachings about children being viewed as spiritual beings rather than kids. From 2007 through 2008, Katie played the role the public expected: devoted wife, attentive mother, and polished Hollywood presence. But behind closed doors, the marriage was surrounded by constant oversight. Miscavige remained a looming influence, while staff members monitored daily routines and major decisions were shaped by people Katie barely knew. What once felt like structure slowly revealed itself as control tightening inch by inch. By 2009, the flawless image of Katie Holmes and Tom Cruise was already cracking from the inside. The public still saw red carpets and smiles, but Katie was navigating growing restrictions tied directly to Scientology's expectations. Former high-ranking Scientologists later claimed Tom's household was monitored through assistants, nannies, and handlers who quietly reported back to church leadership. This system, they said, had existed during his marriage to Nicole Kidman and continued unchanged when Katie became his wife. For Katie, motherhood became both a refuge and a source of inner conflict. Scientology teachings describe children as fully formed spiritual beings, not kids needing softness or protection. Leah Remini later described adults speaking harshly to baby Suri, a reflection of those beliefs that troubled many observers. As Tom's status inside Scientology rose, the pressure intensified. Leaked footage from his 2004 Freedom Medal of Valor ceremony showed him praising the church in a black turtleneck, making one thing unmistakably clear. He wasn't just a member anymore, he was the crown jewel, and life inside that world came with rules Katie could no longer ignore. Anyone connected to him was expected to match that same level of commitment, no questions asked. By 2010, cracks were starting to show, even if Katie Holmes kept insisting everything was amazing. She appeared alone more often, avoided talking about Scientology, and seemed emotionally distant in ways fans couldn't ignore. The smiles were still there, but the energy felt drained. She also couldn't overlook the pattern forming right in front of her. Nicole Kidman and Penelope Cruz had both been pushed aside after refusing to fully embrace the church. Gossip sites quietly pointed out something even stranger. Tom Cruise's previous marriages had ended when his wives turned 33. As 2012 approached and Katie neared that same age, the coincidence felt less like trivia and more like a warning sign flashing red. The idea of escape stopped feeling dramatic and started feeling necessary. By early 2012, Katie realized that if she didn't leave soon, she might never get out at all. Tom Cruise was deeply embedded in Scientology, surrounded by handlers, and tightly connected to David Miscavige. To the church, Tom wasn't just a member, he was a prized asset, and anyone close to him was expected to fall in line. As Katie approached 33, the pressure intensified fast. Scientology's influence had seeped into every corner of her life. She felt watched, cautious about every word, surrounded by people loyal to the organization rather than to her. Seeing how Nicole Kidman had been labeled a suppressive person and pushed away from her children terrified her. Katie feared the same fate, and even worse, feared it could happen to Suri. That fear pushed her into action. Katie began planning her escape in total secrecy. She hired 3 law firms across 3 states, used a hidden burner phone to avoid surveillance, and kept every move concealed from Scientology-linked staff. Even small details were guarded like secrets. Her father, Martin Holmes, quietly helped from the background. A carefully written prenup became her shield, protecting her rights and making the divorce difficult to challenge. Timing was everything, and she waited for the exact moment. In June 2012, she moved fast. She quietly replaced Tom's staff, secured a new apartment in New York City, and filed for divorce while Tom was out of the country. She asked for sole custody, full control over Suri's upbringing, and firm boundaries that couldn't be crossed. She wasn't just leaving a marriage, she was breaking away from a system to protect her child. Katie feared Suri could be pulled deeper into Scientology if she waited too long. The risk felt too high. And then something unexpected happened. The divorce was finalized in just 11 days. Hollywood was stunned, but insiders weren't surprised at all. Ending things quickly avoided public scrutiny and stopped questions that no one wanted answered. When the dust settled in July 2012, Katie Holmes stepped into a life that looked nothing like the one she had left behind overnight. She went from being the wife of one of Hollywood's most powerful men to a single mother in New York, trying to reclaim the identity she had slowly lost. Freedom came, but it wasn't easy. For the first time since 2005, she was without handlers, without bodyguards answering to someone else, without the constant shadow of Scientology leadership. She could finally breathe, but she also had to relearn how to live. In later interviews, Katie described that time as intense. She was navigating sudden independence while raising a 6-year-old who needed stability above all else. New York became her refuge. She walked the streets makeup-free, took Suri to school herself, and slowly built a circle of real friends, people with no agendas, no organizations, and no control. The kindness of strangers ended up meaning more to Katie Holmes than she ever openly admitted. She once recalled a quiet moment late at night when her daughter Suri fell asleep in a taxi after calling her to be picked up from a sleepover. The driver gently carried the sleeping child into Katie's home so she wouldn't wake up, a small act of care that stayed with her for years. That moment became a powerful reminder. Life outside Scientology could be grounded, human, and ordinary in ways she had deeply missed. No scripts, no handlers, no pressure, just simple kindness that felt real again. At the same time, Tom Cruise's absence became harder to ignore. Despite publicly saying he was committed to co-parenting, he was rarely seen with Suri as the years passed. Eventually, there were no public photos of them together at all, and the silence spoke louder than any statement. In 2013, during a lawsuit against Bauer Media, Tom testified under oath that Suri was no longer a Scientologist. It sounded like a small detail, but within the church, it carried serious weight. Those who leave can be labeled suppressive persons, and active members are often discouraged from maintaining close relationships with them. Tom never publicly confirmed that this belief applied to his own daughter, but insiders claimed it explained the growing distance. As Suri grew older, reports suggested he wasn't present for major milestones like birthdays, school events, holidays, or graduation. Financially, he continued meeting his obligations, paying roughly $400,000 a year until she turned 18, along with medical, educational, and extracurricular costs as outlined in the divorce agreement. Emotionally, though, Katie raised Suri on her own. Friends described their bond as inseparable, built through years of quiet strength and consistency. It wasn't flashy, but it was steady and real. As she rebuilt her life, Katie eventually found love again, but she handled it with extreme caution. In 2013, rumors surfaced linking her to Jamie Foxx, a man Tom had ironically introduced her to years earlier. For nearly 5 years, the relationship stayed hidden, reportedly due to restrictions in her divorce agreement. She wasn't allowed to publicly date or introduce romantic partners into Suri's life during that period. Only after those terms expired did Katie and Jamie begin appearing together quietly, moving carefully as if relearning how to exist without being monitored. At the same time, Katie reclaimed her career. She returned to Broadway, starred in independent films, stepped behind the camera as a director, and began making creative choices on her own terms. No one approved her interviews, no one corrected her words, and no one dictated her personal life anymore. Still, the emotional aftermath lingered. In a reflective interview with InStyle at age 41, Katie hinted at years of self-silencing. She spoke about learning to trust her own voice, acknowledge her feelings, and stop living for the expectations of others. Many readers believed she was quietly referencing her marriage. She didn't need to name it. Her survival said enough. Reaching 45 became a turning point, not because of age, but because Katie Holmes finally felt safe enough to face the truth she had spent years pushing aside. She no longer felt the need to defend the fairy tale or soften the reality behind it. Katie Holmes didn't have to pretend that silence was strength anymore. She had escaped, and for the first time she could speak honestly about the world she left behind without fear or hesitation. In recent interviews, her words never attacked Tom Cruise directly. Instead, they carried the emotional weight of living beside a man deeply intertwined with Scientology and its leader, David Miscavige. What she described wasn't drama or scandal. It was exhaustion, the kind that builds when you're constantly reshaping yourself to fit someone else's belief system, expectations, and boundaries. She spoke openly about how overwhelming motherhood felt under constant public scrutiny, how isolating it was to navigate that pressure alone, and how deeply grateful she was to the strangers in New York who treated her like a regular human being when she felt most fragile and exposed. Looking back, Katie admitted she never fully understood what she was stepping into. Behind the glamour were rigid philosophies and invisible rules. She didn't agree with the monitoring she never asked for, or the pressure she only recognized in hindsight. The speed of the romance, the chaperones, the controlled silence, all of it now made sense in ways it didn't back then. One of the most revealing moments came when she spoke about losing her own voice during those years. Decisions were made above her, around her, and for her, leaving little space to speak freely. But at the center of everything she shared was one truth that never wavered: her daughter, Suri. Katie made it clear that Suri was the reason she ran, the reason she fought back quietly, and the reason she never looked back. She didn't need to name Scientology directly, because the message was already clear. She believed her daughter needed freedom from a world where children were treated as spiritual entities instead of kids, where independence clashed with doctrine, and where outsiders were often viewed with suspicion. She still refuses to criticize Tom publicly, but she doesn't hide the consequences either. She subtly acknowledges the growing distance, the absence that stretches year after year, and the milestones quietly missed. There's no mockery, no blame, just a heavy sadness for what never healed, for what her daughter lost, and for how different things might have been. Yet her story isn't rooted in regret. It's grounded in pride. Pride in raising a child on her own, pride in building a gentle, normal life, pride in escaping a system many never leave, and pride in the quiet courage it took to walk away one night with a burner phone in her pocket, a 6-year-old in her arms, and no intention of ever returning. Katie Holmes walked away from a life the world believed was perfect, but she did it to protect the one thing that mattered most. Now that she's finally opened up, what do you think? Did she make the right choice by leaving that world behind? If you enjoyed this deep dive, make sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss what's coming next. We'll see you in the next video.